welcome again. We have a wonderful program today, not only for our live audience, but for those who are listening in on Zoom. Today's presentation will be a recital of the Passover Poem Project. It's a cycle of 8 songs set to the poetry of Barbara Joan Tiger Bass, with music composed by Stephen Pixley. Micah member Beth Rubens, a soprano, will perform all 8 of the songs, accompanied by Jillian Cookson, the pianist, who has graciously stepped in for Stephen, unfortunately who could not be here today. So our artists will discuss their eclectic music following in a Q&A. Here's some history of the Passover Poems Project. Starting in 1996, Beth Rubens' cousin, Barbara Joan Tiger Bass, an Oakland, California-based poet who received her MFA from Mills College and BA from Sarah Lawrence, had written an annual poem on the theme of Passover to share with her family and friends satyrs. Beth asked Barbara Joan to find a composer to set these texts to music. They found Stephen Pixley, who unfortunately, as I said, is not here, but is listening in. And although he's not here today, he's a classical vocalist, a voice teacher, musical theater and art song composer, choral director, and klezmer performer. He earned a master's degree at the New England Conservatory of Music, a BA from Vassar, and a second master's in world music from Wesleyan University. Jillian Cookson, who was born in England and who is stepping in, and playing for the trio, received her early music training at the Walford School of Music, where she studied piano, violin, and cello. Jillian has diplomas from the London's Royal Academy of Music and Royal College of Music. She's a vocal coach and accompanist who has performed locally at the National Gallery, the Phillips, the Renwick, and the Kennedy Center, as well as in London and Madrid. She now serves on the University of Delaware's Department of Music. Our own Madeline Rubens is the Cantorial soloist for Beit Aviv congregation in Columbia, Maryland, and the former soloist at Hevrat Shalom in Rockville. Beth received her BA from Vassar and her master's in vocal performance from the San Francisco Conservatory of Music. Beth has a private voice studio in Washington, D.C., and lives with her family, all proud members of the Temple Micah community. So, Beth, where are you? There, please. Okay.
You're not going to hear me through the mic when I'm singing. You're going to hear the ambient sound. But before that, I just want to say I'm going to perform the full cycle of 8 songs, so please do not applaud between the songs. Wait until the end. And then I'll tell a little bit about how these came to be, and I'll invite my cousin up, and hopefully Steve will join us as well virtually. And at that point, you can ask questions. Thank you.
angel of death hovers blood acrid, sticky above the door. We prepare for narrow escape. Roundups on sons and daughters are sources of strength, spirits of bygone passage. Tribal chiefs occur, his rule no lights away. Diana Shalom, Amen. Tribal chiefs occur, his rule no lights away. Diana Shalom, Shalom, Amen. The angel above prepares wicked pyramids. We creep out of bondage beyond pestilence and threat with our core of wild faith. The sea splits wide before us. We enter because nothing is worse than what already passed, loss imprinted on our hearts. We travel until our doors are opened, until our doors are opened. Slightly bereft, they departed in a rush of wind, and bare feet into the sands, into the parted sea, into long generation lines, carried without the leaven the story of slavery. Toward imagined freedom carried the story of slavery. And we repeat with sultanly terms, until our doors are open. We repeat them with our salt and bitter herbs. We repeat, do we have him on? Okay, great. And is this now on? No. Okay. Are we on the mic? Okay. So he's on Zoom. Yeah. Are we going to be able to get Steve on our? Okay. The plan is to have him so you all can see him. So I will tell you, can he hear me? Okay, make sure he can. There he is. All right. So I'll tell you a little story a little bit about how these came to be. Back in 2020, June of 2020, my husband, Brent, and I were sitting having a picnic by the Potomac for our anniversary in the height of the pandemic. And I said, I need a project. I need a musical project. And he said, well, your cousin has written these poems for Passover, and she has been doing so for about 25 years. Why don't you take those and find somebody to set them to music? And I went, what a great idea. And I wrote to my cousin, and I said, what do you think of this? And she said, yes! And she got very excited, and we both got very excited. It took a little while to find the right composer. And Stephen Pixley, who we have here, who's joining us, from the greater Boston area. He and I were both alum of Vassar College. And during the COVID pandemic, people were forming groups via college alumni networks. He and I were part of a Vassar alumni network, and then it became a Vassar educators alumni network, and we both found out that we were music educators, singers. I found out that he was a composer. He asked me to take a look of a song of his that he had written called Réveil, which is set to a poem by Balzac, at which he sent me, and I recorded it. I have a background with French language. He wanted somebody with a facility for the language to sing it. So I did that, and I loved his music. And so I said, hey, Steve, would you be interested in looking at these poems that my cousin wrote and thinking about setting them to music? And so we sent him a few. He got very excited, and he immediately started composing to them. And then we sent him more, and thus was formed this cycle.
which we called the Passover Poem Project. So before he talks about the music a little bit, I'm going to invite Barbara Joan Tiger Bass, my first cousin. I'm going to invite her up to speak a little bit. Our mothers are sisters. They grew up in New Jersey together. And our grandmother, Eleanor Tiger, who was a big supporter of the arts and of our arts in particular, and helped me get through music school, came to my final recital when I got my master's. This is her dress I'm wearing, and her bracelet. And Barbara Joan is wearing a pendant that was hers. So we carry her with us today. Anyway, I'll let Barbara Joan speak.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Okay, first of all, I have a vocal tremor, and then I'm going to start crying. So if anyone can't understand me, I'll repeat and I'll try to remember to breathe. But I'm so moved and so grateful, and thank you. I cry a lot anyway, but this is ridiculous. So I was raised not with any organized religion. My parents had kind of rejected organized religion. And then I moved to California with my first husband, who was the child of survivors. And our friend group invited us to Seder, and Mickey knew I was a poet, and she said, "Can you bring a poem?" Yes. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? So I read everything I could find about Passover, and I wrote the first poem. I think it's the Passover Prayer is the first one I wrote in like 1996, before I even had a child. And then I just kept writing every year, and frankly, every year I think, oh God, I've written enough. There's nothing more to say about Passover. I'm just gonna repeat. And every year within the first a couple of weeks before Passover, I'll open my writing, one of my billion books, and I'll be like, oh, here comes a Passover poem, and out it comes. So there you have it. Slavery never ends, and neither does poetry if we're lucky. Although let's hope that slavery will end. Anyway, I can't believe I don't get to meet you in person yet, Steve, but I do look forward to that. And I want to especially thank you, Jillian. Wonderful. And thank all of you. I don't know, is there anything else I was supposed to say when I stood up here? I love having a microphone.
We'll pass it over to Steve to talk a little bit about his compositional process. Do you have sound? No. He's muted. Can you unmute him? He's still muted. Oh, okay. To whoever's monitoring the Zoom? No, not yet. Oh, try now. No. Bear with us, folks. We're trying to get him unmuted. Yeah. I think there's something on this end, Steve. The output. This is not the first performance of these. We performed them at. Try it now. Yeah. Anyway, we performed them. Our very first performance was in the Boston area at Stephen's congregation, Kerem Shalom, in Concord, Massachusetts. And we both I sang the songs. He performed some other amazing music that he wrote, set to some Rilke poems that he sang, among other things. So anyway, I'll hand it over to Stephen now to discuss.
Thank you. Okay, can you really hear me? Yes. Give me a thumbs up if you can. Okay, good. All right. So I'm really thrilled to be able to hear these songs for the first time when I'm not sitting at the piano. I've never actually been able to sit back and hear them before, and I'm really, really happy. Beth and Jillian, you did a fabulous job, and I have loved working with these poems that I'm doing. I shared with with an audience here who performed last month in Boston area that when I take on a poem, trying to find the music for it, I have to, I have to become one with the poem. I have to know it so well that I feel like I wrote it. I memorize it. I just recite it in my head for sometimes months and months till I can't separate it from myself anymore. And then, if I'm lucky, which is not always, I start to find music in it. And at that point, at the point at which I've got music for it, then I can't separate the poem from the music anymore. And it feels like the poem and the music were birthed as one thing. Of course they weren't, and another musician would find entirely different plethora of musical options for any particular poem. But when we get to this point where it's down on paper, where I'm at the piano and singing it, I can't tell it anymore from the music. And if you've had the experience of loving the lyrics to a pop song, maybe you had a high school class where they told you to bring in your favorite poem and memorize the poem, and you brought in something by, I don't know, Sting or Emerson, Lake and Palmer or Rockville. In your head, when you're saying the words, the lyrics of that song, it sounds like a poem to you. It feels like a poem. It is a poem. But for the people listening, if they don't know that music, they don't always get it. And they may not even hear it as poetry. The wonderful thing about this experience is that we have stuff that stands alone as poetry, and it's gorgeous. There's so much variety to it. And then when you layer music onto it to become one thing, it's something I think for me as a composer very magical. And I always aim to make songs in a way that singers enjoy singing them. I really aim for melodies and harmonies and rhythms that feel good to sing. So that's sort of the bottom line for me. If it doesn't feel good to sing, if it's not something you want to be singing, then it's not it's not success for me. I could talk about any of these individual songs. I could talk endlessly about them, about compositional techniques and decisions I made. That could take hours, so I won't do that. But I will give you two overarching guidelines that I have. One is that I really wanted to have a variety to them, a variety of rhythm, of texture, of harmonic structure, of colors. And I wanted also there to be a variety of elements that to me felt like they had a Jewish sort of a layer or an undercurrent of Jewish, from Jewish music. And so I directly hinted at, I won't tell you where, but there's very specific Jewish composers who've meant a lot to me. So if you were to get inside my head, you'd be able to find places where there's Leonard Cohen, or there's Gustav Mahler. There's a lot of Arnold Schoenberg in here. There's some Bob Dylan in here. There's some Bernstein and Sondheim. There's some Gershwin. There's some Irving Berlin. You may not find those from just listening to them, but for me, they're all there, and especially the colors and the harmonies and the melodic lines. So that gives you sort of a clue about what my project was and what I was up to. And if you have questions for any of the three of us, please ask. I'm here. I have to sign off a couple of minutes before 1 o'clock when I have a parade of third graders coming into my room because I do my music classes.
Are there any questions? Do any of you have any questions?
Let me explain the protocol. Ordinarily, we have a mic that works.
Right.
This mic only works for the Zoom audience, as I understand it. So
okay.
If
And
you
this
have questions, use your outside voice, and I will repeat it to the Zoom audience.
Oh, now this is on. This is now on. Martha.
Just because I didn't catch any of those composer references, I wonder if you could tease us with where maybe Bernstein or Sondheim or Gershwin could be
Asking
found.
for keys to the
Those are
music
my
of
interests.
various artists
Thank you.
from the composer.
Okay. Yeah, well, if you were to look particularly with Bernstein, Bernstein learned a lot of his technique from, in my opinion, from two really important American composers that were predecessors of him. One was Charles Ives, and one was Cantorial. But Bernstein added elements of pop music and particularly Latin influence. And one of the ways he did it was to have really, really active syncopated rhythms and to have really dense chord clusters, as did Gershwin. Chord clusters that really derive from jazz. So I'm sitting here to count. I don't know if you'll be able to hear this. But if you're at all familiar with music theory, you might have heard of something called a chord. And you might even know about something called a triad, which is going to be do, mi, and so. So if I play C, E, and G, I get three notes. And that's a triad. And a triad is sort of the basic Western harmony chord. If I then add some blues notes to that, which come out of blues and then jazz, I could add a flat 7 and 7 chord. I could add a flat 3 and a minor 1. But I could take that basic triad and add those notes to it and add some other notes to it and get these really thick jazz harmony chords. Things called ninths, 11ths, 13ths, diminished, augmented, all these things. And you can cut chords where instead of just being a major chord like this, you can add a second to it, you can add a fourth to it, you can add a sixth to it. You can eventually have a chord cluster where you nearly all 10 fingers playing notes on that keyboard, and it still can sound harmonic if it's within that genre and within that style. So the main way I had Bernstein was to have songs, for instance, the last song, with really syncopated rhythms, with really dense, thick little chord clusters that come out of the jazz area but fit within more of a musical theater style, if that makes any sense. With Gershwin, really, it's about the singable lines and about lines that feel jazzy and syncopated, but also feel like they're just like they were written almost by an operatic composer with a line that just soars and flows. And of course, he gets that from many people earlier in music history as well. I don't know if that helps at all.
Yeah, you had it answered. Anyone else? Yeah.
My question is, have there been any more poems since 2012? Every year. So are you going to have part 2?
The question was if there's going to be a part 2, if there are more poems since 2012.
Will there be a part
There was
2
a
with more poems?
2023. There's a poem every year. With no sign of stopping, right?
I'm still not free.
This is, I guess, a question for all of you about how did you select these 8 and what drew you to, there's definitely connections and words and themes between them, but how did you choose these 8 as a set when you were conceiving of the project out of all the poems that were done?
How did you choose these 8?
So I didn't initially choose them. I sent some to Steve, and he took it from there.
Yeah, I think, Beth, you sent me 21 poems. And I tried to line up one, and I said, do you want more? Do you really want more? And she bumped it up to, he said, yeah, I'd like 3, so I did 3, and then it was eventually 8. The 8 were not chosen pre-chosen. They really were about, I was living with a poem, living with them, and making it, finding music in those 8. So it's not like I deselected the others. It's more like these are the ones that music came to me for. But after 8, I just was exhausted. It was enough for a while, and it seemed like a good length for a vocal cycle of 8
I can answer that. No.
Arranged for a choral setting?
These are the first arrangements, and all sorts of adjustments were made along the way, and we spoke a lot, and it's very hard to rehearse with somebody on Zoom because of the time lapse. Steve and I would have meetings. He would send me the piano, the recorded track that he would put into his keyboard and computer, and then he would send me an MP3, and then I would practice it, as well as practicing it with Jillian, and then I would sing it for him with the MP3, and then we would talk about how to make things easier for me here and there, and how to make adjustments, and so, no, so far, just for voice and piano.
Musically speaking, was there any influence by the fact that these were all done in the context of Passover, which has its own motifs and themes and melodies? Musically.
So I lead at Passover State every year. I also perform senior centers frequently, Jewish senior centers and West Jewish. So I have a lot of traditional Passover music sort of embedded in me, but I did not borrow any particular melodies or tunes from any of that repertoire. As well, I aimed for sort of more general, there were some spots where I chose to sort of build things a little bit off of Jewish modes, musical modes and scales, but they kind of went in their own direction from there, so we didn't stick to it. And I didn't specifically choose any that are particularly associated with Passover times.
David.
Musically, what was there about the very last song that sounded so Jewish? I mean, I know it was Oy vey and all that, but
Yeah, okay, that is the one song in the set that I have already used the melody and the rhythm for in a different, in my present version of Alice in Wonderland. And that I originally wrote as Pleasanton, just as a full-out instrumental breakout, sort of a freelance Pleasanton. So I haven't written down the music component quite a while. And so that piece has been performed not in vocals, and in sort of earlier versions, it's developed some differences in this almost idea. But I would say that if you're familiar with Pleasant repertoire, it's what most Americans are probably most think of as typical Jewish music these days, because it's been so prevalent in the pop scene. And so that's probably maybe why that particular song might go in that way. I'm just guessing. I would imagine, I have imagined that if I could have incorporated like a clarinet or violin soloist into this setting, I would have given them a ton of measures to just do a Pleasant solo.
Almost. One more. Mr. Kirsch? Oh, over here.
COVID has been particularly cruel to performing artists, and yet the response of the performing community, particularly in music, with new variations and techniques has been extraordinary. Would anybody care to comment on what's next? Not talking about another virus, but in terms of what has going forward, what has happened here in the last 3 years that is worth preserving and working with?
Well, I'll just say for one thing, I don't think we would have even conceived of doing this, prior to COVID. We have all become so accustomed to using Zoom, the way we rehearsed together, that wasn't even in our thought process before COVID, and yet we found ways around things like that. I mean, I was teaching kids music online at the beginning of COVID, which I never thought possible, and somehow I got through that. So the fact that we can even like beam Steve in from far away and present something like this and have him contribute, I think wasn't even a possibility. I mean, advances technologically are just constantly. That I'm not the one to imagine what's happening there, but
yeah, I think for me as a writer, the isolation offered me a lot more time to myself, and coming out of isolation in order to collaborate is this incredible gift and kind of synthesis of all that being alone has offered. And so I feel like this opportunity came out of the stillness and the silence came the connection and integration, and that feels like an incredible gift. So, yeah, no.
Yeah, the first time that I was in an ensemble of people after COVID and singing with other people, it was like, singing alone in my house for so long. It just was such a relief to be able to join voices again. I'm sure you all, those of you who sing, even just being here and singing together on Shabbat service, what a joy to all sing together again.